There are few goals as memorable as collecting your first fortune. Hitting Pirate Legend, unlocking your first curse, all of these come second to finally reaching 1 million golds. But how does one go about doing that, and what should we spend that money on? Do not fear, fellow pirates, for I'm about to teach you. I have got my hands on a brand new account to show you how to go from starving sailor to magnificent millionaire. And the best part, you can do this on your own with no PvP skills and no gold boosting events. I am going to arm you with all the knowledge necessary to kickstart your adventure on the Sea of Thieves. This used to be a two-part series, but I decided to put them together and added some hidden bonus content that didn't make it into the original videos. But anyway, just like any good story, this one starts at the beginning. Waking up on day one on the high seas and not a single piece of gold in my pocket, I was ready to make use of my shiny new quest table to begin my journey. Our first course of action was to purchase an Emissary flag license. That's a one-time purchase of 20,000 gold, allowing you to raise the flags as often as you want. Basically, you can level up your Emissary flag by putting treasure on your boat that corresponds to the company you are representing. Shiny chests for the gold holders, skulls for the Order of Souls, and cargo for the Merchant Alliance. Doing that is going to level up the flag to a maximum grade 5, and when you sell your treasure whilst flying its maximum level, the treasure you sell for that company will come with a bonus 150% of its original value. So you can see why this would be the first thing we want to get our hands on. Unfortunately for me, the game had other plans. I have to do the tutorial first to be able to dive for anything? Oh god, okay. Oh no. Please don't tell me this is what— of course it's him. So this is how I found out that I cannot in fact use my quest table at all until I've completed the tutorial. Annoyed as I was over having to listen to Phantom Santa Claus, I do recommend you pay attention to him when you pick up the game for yourself, because the tutorial is actually pretty good now. But if you think this was going to stop me from starting my money farming agenda, you'd be mistaken, because en route to complete my tutorial, I found a shipwreck. Shipwrecks are positively loaded with loot and are absolutely worth a detour, especially if you are new to the game. And if you're lucky, you might even find some king tier loot. That stuff is extremely valuable and basically the highest tier loot you can find out in the world. Rapier Cay was my destination for the tutorial, where I was tasked to complete a simple X marks the spot voyage. That very island also housed a mermaid statue, which I decided to destroy via cannon fire just to make my life a bit easier. These statues can drop up to 3 gems, ranging in value in ascending order from blue to green to red. These things can also be sold to any of the companies to gain gold and reputation, so whichever you prefer, you can just sell it to them. Finding the treasure was no problem at all, and I even spotted a collector's chest. Luck was definitely on my side, because not only was this thing filled with loot, I could also use it to transport 3 trinkets or skulls at a time, meaning this chest is the only thing I am not going to sell until I end my session. For now, it was time to return to Sanctuary Outpost. I could have sailed on over to New Golden Sands, but since that's a massive port town, selling my loot there would take a lot longer than just going back to Sanctuary. I began bringing my treasure to the corresponding faction representatives and watched as my first payout was being poured into my pockets. Once everything was sold, I had amassed the 20,000 gold pieces necessary to buy an Emissary flag license. Just that there was still one thing I hadn't considered. I need to be level 15? God damn it! Yeah, my endgame player privilege was definitely showing. It's been so long since I had to buy an Emissary flag license that I didn't actually know it took reputation level 15 to be able to purchase it. That means that our day 1 prime directive had changed. The original plan was to get 60,000 gold pieces so I can get my hands on Emissary flags for the 3 main trading companies. Instead, I now had to choose which of the 3 companies I wanted to focus on so I can expedite the process of just getting one of them. Reputation is a lot more difficult to come by than gold. I had a bit of time to make my decision, because before I could plop down a voyage on my quest table, I had to complete the tutorial for all 3 companies. Every single one of these tutorial voyages sent me to the same island, probably just defaulting to the closest one, and taught me the basics of what some of their voyages look like. Since I couldn't buy an Emissary flag anytime soon anyway, I also decided to spend a couple hundred gold on a few cosmetics for my pirate. Because today, we are not Cliff the story guy, we are Ledge the tail dude. Either way, honestly, you can choose whichever company is the most fun to you, or whichever has the cosmetics that you like the best. But since making a lot of money very quickly was our goal for this challenge, I decided to focus on the Order of Souls, and I'll explain why later. Gamers, allow me to let you in on something. The secret to making a lot of gold early on is island hopping. Early game voyages grant you absolutely abysmal payouts compared to the treasure you can find out in the open world, so we are looking for 2 things specifically: skeleton captains and messages in bottles. Captains can spawn on any island at random and drop something called skeleton orders upon defeat. These orders are basically the same as the voyages you can plop down on your quest table, just that most of them grant you better payouts than said low-level voyages. Messages and bottles function in the same way, barring a few exceptions, and can be found in Flotsam, out on the sea, any shoreline of any island, as well as inside shipwrecks. Really, the only thing we want to use voyages on our quest table for is telling us which island we should go to next. So we'll get our guaranteed payout from that voyage, yes, but we will also be checking the beaches for any skeleton captains or messages and bottles. Since we want to hit level 15 with the Order of Souls first, we will be switching between bounties for a skeleton crew, which will send us to small islands, and bounties for skeleton captains, which will send us to bigger islands. I decided to start off with the latter, and my first destination was Lone Cove. Side tangent, when you drop your anchor to stop your ship's momentum, that's completely fine, just make sure you raise it again before jumping off your vessel. If somebody attacks you while you're doing a voyage, you want to be able to just drop your sails and get moving, instead of having to worry about raising your anchor whilst being under cannon fire. Also, if another pirate sees that you have your sails down whilst anchored, that will show them that you are new to the game and as such mark you as easy prey. Anyway, as part of my quest on Lone Cove, I would have to defeat a few waves of skeletons before the captains show up. You're gonna want to pay attention to the tooltips because they teach you how to defeat the various types of skeletons in the game. Before giving them my attention though, I decided to check the beaches in true island hopping fashion. I found treasure and a message in a bottle and an ammo box. Yes! What do we have? Another skelly! Wait, is this a boss? That it was. This bottle contained a quest that's more valuable than anything I had access to at my current level. But before we could tackle that challenge, we have to finish what we came here for. To complete my voyage, all I had to do was take out all the skeletons by following the tooltips on how to defeat them, and once everything was said and done, I could collect my treasure, one skull for every of the 3 captains I have defeated. I also found a snake basket right next to a snake. Not that this would sell for a lot of gold, but this gives me a chance to show you guys that you can stop snakes from spitting venom at you by playing music. Additionally, I got my hands on a rowboat, so I grabbed it and docked it to my ship before proceeding. I decided to complete one more skeleton crew voyage on my way to the boss quest before arriving on Cannon Cove to take on the big guy himself. Once again, raising my sails, then dropping the anchor to stop my momentum before raising it immediately again so I'm not a sitting duck in case of an attack. The first wave of skeletons were those of the shadow variety. You're gonna need some kind of light source to make them vulnerable, and while a lantern will do just fine, you can also use a flare, which every ship spawns with to imitate the sun. I also decided to use some fire bombs here. Those are honestly the best way to combat skeletons of every type, but obviously you only spawn with a limited supply of them. Now I was trying to set up a keg stack to blow up the boss in one go once he spawned, but when I had to face a wave of keg wielding skeletons, well, let's just say that even hundreds of hours in the game don't stop you from making mistakes. Uh-oh. No! No! I missed! There goes my plan. Without my kegs and having run out of fire bombs, fighting the boss was definitely a bit tedious. I recommend switching to a sword and blunderbuss if you're low on supplies, and remember to aim down sights before shooting to reduce your spread, so that as many pellets as possible hit the boss for maximum damage, allowing me to finally claim my rewards. I recommend pit stops to sell your loot on a frequent basis to make sure that you don't lose a massive stack of treasure in case you get sunk. And since Sanctuary was right around the corner, that is exactly what I did. But you know what? Selling your loot like this is incredibly tedious. If I wanted to get to 1,000,000 gold in a reasonable amount of time, I'd need a faster way of getting this done. And thankfully for us, there is one such way: buying your own ship. Becoming a captain via purchase of your own vessel comes with a bunch of benefits, such as being able to save your cosmetics so you don't have to reapply them every time, or decorating it with a variety of trinkets. But the biggest benefit is that captains are allowed to use the Sovereigns. The Sovereigns have a nifty harpoon-equipped tent that makes offloading treasure a lot faster. And you can sell all of your treasure to them, after which they will bring it to the corresponding faction representatives in your stead, saving us a lot of time. The cost for that privilege, 250,000 gold pieces to own a sloop. Our own fortune, about 48,000 golds. I was now a couple hours into this challenge, and obviously there are faster ways to make money. It would be easy for me to go and take on a world event like that Fleet of Fortune over there to make a bunch of gold in one fell swoop, but there are a couple problems. For one, one, I would not recommend day one players to get anywhere near a world event in 2024. Yes, the loot would be a lot better than doing island hopping, but as a new pirate, completing them is gonna take you a lot longer than if you had a base level of experience in the game. And the longer you spend trying to complete a world event, the more likely it is that some other crew is going to attack you. And so far, I was trying everything in my power to avoid other ships, knowing that a new player likely is not going to win those fights on their first day. The second problem was a lack of supplies. We didn't have any coin to spare in order to purchase cannonballs or planks from the merchant, so even if I wanted to, I didn't have the means of completing that fleet event. Now I did remember having seen a storage crate when fighting the boss on Cannon Cove, but forgot to take it along, so I came back to rectify that mistake. I also found another message in a bottle that gave us a delivery quest which we could do later. The storage crate, which could be purchased from the Merchant Alliance at any outpost, was our one-way ticket to Supply City, because with this thing in hands, I can just walk up to any barrel in order to siphon its resources, and there's no place more stocked up on supply barrels than a sea fort. Making sure I stay in the western part of the map, known as the Shores of Plenty, my target was the Imperial Crown Fortress. There we could combine acquiring treasure with getting supplies. On the way, I made a pit stop by Sea Dog's Rest where I found another message in a bottle. Unfortunately, that was a crusty one that tried to send us to a shrine. Ignore that for now, because that's another thing I do not recommend doing on your first day. Between Sea Dog's Rest and the Imperial Crown Fortress was yet another shipwreck, this time with a red beacon sticking out from it. On the note of things you should ignore, this is a Reaper's bounty. The thing is marked on the map and can only be sold at Reaper's hideout, so unless you want other people knowing your exact location, do not put this on your ship. I decided to pick it up and leave it in the water so that it could despawn, making sure that other crews don't have a reason to come here in case they wanted to have it. Other than that, obviously I picked up the other treasure I found. Now, sea forts are probably the least intimidating forts in the game. You can pretty much just stand in one spot and wait for the phantoms to come over to you as you mow them down. I recommend using a pistol because they only take one shot to defeat, and the pistol has the fastest reload in the game. Once you defeat the boss, you can grab the key from where he stood and open the vault. The treasure is honestly not too crazy. It's meant for players that don't have time for long play sessions, but the supplies are absolutely worth the detour if you are planning for a long session. I'd usually recommend not spending too much time supplying up as a new player because you're gonna lose all of that if you get sunk, and trust me, you will get sunk at some point. But since we have been left alone for a few hours already, I decided to do it anyway, hoping our luck would continue. Also, if you're crazy about keeping your barrels organized like me, here's a bit of a pro tip. If you have a bunch of fireworks, you can make sorting your storage crate really easy. So right now, we fill some fireworks and only stuff that we want to have, right? So I want chain shots, I want blunder bombs. Boom. What else do I want? Probably pineapples, right? Now, this storage crate can only take stuff that is already in the crate, and not like bananas and stuff like that. Honestly, that isn't super relevant for your first day, but once you gain some experience and you get into a habit of keeping combat crates under your cannons for easy access during fights, it might come in handy. What will be relevant for your first day is being able to read the map. As we discussed earlier, there are certain things in the game that will be marked on the map, such as the Reaper's bounty. And as I was trying to find my destination for the delivery quest we picked up earlier, I found two marked vessels in that general direction. I could see both of them on the map because they were flying the Emissary flag of the Reaper's Bones. The Reaper's Bones faction is one that comes with a couple of key benefits. For one, if you have a grade 5 Emissary flag, you gain that 150% bonus for every single regular piece of loot, no matter what company it belongs to. And also, at grade 5, you can spot other emissaries on the map. The downside, you will always be marked on the map yourself as soon as you raise it, and you can only sell your treasure at Reaper's hideout. No fancy sovereign harpoons there. For an experienced player, this in combination with completing world events and fighting other players will be a good way of making a lot of gold very quickly. But I think you can see why I recommended the Order of Souls over this high-risk, high-reward proposition. What you need to know is that you should stay away from these ships because chances of them wanting to fight you are higher than those that don't fly that Emissary flag. Meaning, my delivery quest had to wait. Alright, please, if this delivery sends us to Sanctuary, we're gonna be okay. The Reaper is done fighting, we need to adjust our plan. We go north. We go sell our stuff. Now that was the plan, but yet another shipwreck was tempting me just a little ways away from the outpost. Considering how tedious it is to move treasure without a captain's ship, and seeing as how the Reaper was on his way to the hideout instead of to me, I decided to chance it and grab some more loot before going to sell all of it. And to say it was worth it would definitely be an understatement because the loot was really good. This was my biggest haul yet. When I arrived at Sanctuary, I was giddy with anticipation to find out how much gold we'd make. And well, we managed to double our fortune. Since it only took me 2.5 hours to gain 100,000 gold, I was fairly confident I'd be able to buy my own vessel by the end of day 1. The real question was whether or not I'd be able to reach level 15 with the Order of Souls for my Emissary flag. But for now, we just continued on our mission, checking for captains and bottled messages, as well as taking on emergent encounters such as a random skelly ship that spawned on me. I even got around to finally doing my delivery quest that has been sitting in my inventory for a while. Another reason I highly recommend island hopping for new players is because it teaches you about the fundamentals of the game. You come across a vast variety of different treasures, you learn the basics of sailing, get to know the islands on the map, and you're completing various different quests instead of just doing the same thing over and over again. I also came across a crying chest that, when left unattended, will definitely fill your ship with water until you sink. So while my ship was sailing towards the delivery destination, I took my rowboat to the outpost in order to sell it. All in all, I was making great progress, and for the next little while, nothing of note happened. At least until I came across yet another shipwreck. Now the core message? Treasury! Secret Wilds. This might be a good one too. Secret Wilds, it's at the edge of the map. I mean, it's a long ways away from us, but the Breath of the Sea could be big for a rep. So, remember when we found that other coral message and I told you to ignore it? Well, there are two different kinds of coral messages. One will send you to one of the many shrines and the other to one of the many treasuries. Shrines will always require you to solve some kind of puzzles, and treasuries are basically just wave defense combat encounters that take place in a single room. You can go and complete any of them at your own leisure if you so desire, but if you find a coral message first, that specific shrine or treasury will grant you a unique item called the Breath of the Sea. And just like a mermaid gem, the Breath of the Sea can be sold to any company for a big chunk of reputation. Considering I was still 3 levels away from my Emissary flag after selling my treasure, yeah, I'd be jumping at that opportunity, especially because the treasury of the Secret Wilds was at the edge of the map. Any of these encounters will necessitate you leaving your ship unattended, so you want to make sure you don't have anything of value on board before diving down. The entrance to the treasury is marked with a glowing piece of coral that, when struck, opens the way inside. And that's really all the instructions I can give you. It's an extremely straightforward encounter where you simply take the Disney sticks that lay around the arena to take out whatever enemy is being spawned on top of you. If you die, you are going to respawn down in the arena again, so besides leaving your ship alone, it's extremely low risk. Though to be fair, that one risk is the reason I wouldn't recommend you come here as a new player unless you have a coral message that sends you there. But when every enemy is defeated and the encounter is complete, you'll be able to bask in your riches. Yes! Yes, Ruby Breath of the Sea, let's go. It was worth it after all. And a chest of ancient tributes. It was worth it. The Breath of the Sea follows the same color scheme as the mermaid gems, meaning yes, we had gotten our hands on the most expensive of the 3 varieties. And at this point, all we had to do was stuff our stuff into the statue and pick it back up from a mermaid that will spawn above water. If you get to this point, it doesn't even matter if your ship got sunk, because your treasure will be safe with a mermaid until you come to collect it. Honestly, it was just shy of a miracle that I had gone the whole day without getting attacked. I mean, okay, I was making sure to always sail the opposite direction of other ships that I spotted. The Reaper most assuredly did their part in keeping other players busy, and at one point somebody activated a Fort of the Damned, which probably took a lot of attention away from my little sloop. What I'm trying to say is that, yes, you can stack the deck in your favor to try and avoid conflict, but it is extremely lucky for so many stars to have aligned in order to allow me this peace and tranquility, which means your mileage may vary. The important takeaway is that as long as you sell your loot frequently, you're never going to lose enough treasure to be worth getting angry over. So don't go stacking huge piles of shinies until you get some experience. And if you think it's unfair how lucky I got in my first session on this new account, just wait until I show you day 2. But for the time being, I was about to find out that a bottled message I found on my way back to Sanctuary had granted me more than I bargained for. 3 crests from 1 bottle? Oh, you're right, actually. Crescent Isle, and then this is Rapier. Oh my god! Okay, at this point, it's actually ridiculous how lucky I got, and I knew I was going to have to pay for that at some point in the future. For now, I had a lot of treasure to sell in what would be a reminder as to why investing into my own ship is a good idea. Because my god, do I miss being able to just sell everything at the Sovereigns. But boy, was I getting close to level 15, and my own ship was finally within striking distance too. Now here's the thing, with the 3 quests I got from that message in a bottle, I was certain I'd make no less than 20,000 gold pieces, allowing me to buy that Emissary flag license so long that I got that final level with the Order of Souls. Meaning for the final part of day 1, I decided to take a bit of a risk to make that last remaining 50,000 gold. I would join the hunt for the skull of Siren's song. The developers call this a competitive voyage because basically every piece of treasure you find on this quest will be marked on the map and be visible to other players who also accept the quest, just like the Reaper's bounty we found earlier. But the item it awards will sell for a flat rate of 50,000 gold. Since this quest was introduced in Season 10 and most players have already finished their commendations for it, I would estimate that there's about a 50% chance that you can complete the entire thing without being contested. For the other 50%, well, good luck. No better way to practice PvP than doing some PvP, I suppose. When accepting the quest, an NPC will spawn on your ship and basically explain to you how the whole thing works. You're also going to get a bunch of tooltips throughout the voyage, so make sure to read them. In essence, it's a very simple X marks the spot quest where you have to find a key and a chest each on a different island. And conveniently, I'd be able to complete the remainder of my quests whilst working on this project. My absolutely stacked bottle quest gave me a staggering 9 chests, all of the king tier variety. Another handful of skulls for my captain hunting quest to get to level 15, and the delivery quest. Yeah, we don't talk about the delivery quest, because now it was Scholar Siren's song o'clock, and I am happy to report that I landed on the side of the coin flip that had me completely uncontested for this entire voyage. Once I put the key into the chest, this skull would be revealed, and if you're a good pirate that reads tooltips, you'll know that you cannot sell this at an outpost like a normal skull. The specific destination of it is only revealed once the chest is open, and in my case, that happened to be Snake Island. And guess what? The Reaper 5 was too busy selling that treasure to even care about what I was doing. In celebration of that fact, I decided to use the skull in order to defeat an Ashen Guardian that just so happened to be on the island before finding Brixie to cash in on my reward. The Reaper was none the wiser. I got to sell my treasure and was now in possession of over 300,000 gold pieces after about 6.5 hours of gameplay. I could finally purchase that Order of Souls Emissary flag, get my hands on a ship of my own from the main menu, and finish the day with 58,305 pieces of gold left in my pockets, which we are going to spend before beginning our adventure on day 2. I mean, hey, the challenge is called from 0 to 1 million, not from 58k to 1 million. Day 1 almost felt like a day 0, considering that a captain vessel feels like a prerequisite to get this challenge done in any reasonable amount of time, and considering the fact that we didn't get into a single fight at all. Either way, whatever new player magic protected me before, none of that was going to save me moving forward, because ladies and gentlemen, it's a new day on a new ship with a new goal: 1 million golds. Oh, and let's not forget this new segue to our sponsor for today, gamersubs.gg. Let's face it, one thing we need during long gaming sessions is energy, and what better way to acquire said energy than via a beverage? Trust the industry leader in gaming energy as well as nutrition, Gamersubs, and enjoy phenomenal flavors such as Grandpa's Ashes, Anime Growth Eye, and of course, Blowhole Blast. But if these are a bit too spicy for you, do not worry, they also have flavors that you don't have to hide from your roommates, such as Black Cherry, Dragon Fruit Punch, and Blue. Yep. Just blue. One tub of these is good for 100 servings, they are sugar-free, keto-friendly, and have no added fillers. But gamers, I have a confession to make. I don't actually like energy drinks, which is why I am drinking Gamersubs caffeine-free versions of these beverages. For the flavor, that is. When I'm in need of energy, I'm relying on Gamersubs black tea. Obviously, full disclosure, as a Gamersubs partner, they sent me pretty much anything I want for free, but I'm such a big fan of their teas and snacks specifically that I had them sent me like a dozen of each. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that Gamersubs has something for everybody, whether you want a beverage for the flavor, for a caffeine kick, or just because you want to support my channel. Oh yeah, did you know that you can save 10% on your order simply by going to gamersubs.gg/Cliff or using code Cliff at checkout? Don't forget to bookmark my link because I get a kickback every time you use my code. Thanks a bunch to Gamersubs for sponsoring today's video, and now, on to day 2. Our first course of action was leveling up our Emissary flag. Since we opted for the Order of Souls as our faction of choice, our prime directive will be to collect as many skulls as possible to level up our flag, and once it hits rank 5, we can sell all of them with a 150% bonus to their original value. Now my plan was to knock out regular skeleton hunting voyages until I eventually hit rank 5, but I immediately got a little distracted. Oh, would you look at that? Did I just spot a money-making opportunity? Accept the quest? Okay, the Skull of Siren's song might be the only skull currently in the game that does not benefit from an Order of Souls Emissary flag, but it's selling for 50,000 gold was reason enough for me to pursue it when the opportunity arises. But first, I wanted to complete the quest that I came here for before dedicating more time to that distraction. I decided to really take my time with this because remember, the Skull of Siren's song quest is a competitive voyage, and I wanted to make sure that I remain uncontested when trying to collect it. By the time I was done hunting the Skelly Captains, nobody else had turned up to dig up either key or chest for the voyage, so I felt like it was pretty safe for me to collect them. Well, at least so I thought, until I realized that other players weren't the only thing that could stand in my way. Alrighty. Oh no, oh no. No! No! Please, rare! My 50k! Oh my god, rare. Why is that still a bug? Nothing quite like an item getting stuck in your boat. In hindsight, this truly was the Harbinger, a sign to show that the free farm of yore was no longer. Any attempt of retrieving the key was futile, and at the end, all I could do was scuttle my boat to get it unstuck. The one thing was very obvious. The investments we made in day 1 were absolutely worth it. Being able to sell my treasure at the Sovereigns thanks to our captained vessel made selling loot an absolute breeze, and the bonus that came with even just a rank 3 emissary flag was incredible. No longer do we have to walk our treasure to the faction representatives just to make peanuts. We only had just begun our day and already had 50,000 gold pieces in our pockets. The only downside, once my ship respawned, it no longer had the Skull of Siren song Voyage on the mast. So that whole ordeal ended up being kind of for naught. At least somebody left me a storage crate at Daggertooth Outpost so I didn't have to start completely from scratch again. Acting like nothing had happened at all, I decided to take on a Skelly fort that spawned just a little ways away from the outpost, seeing how that world event naturally holds a bunch of skulls that would benefit my emissary flag. And I think now would be a good time to talk about this specific world event. For those of you who are new, let me show you like Fortress 101 good practice, okay? Step 1. Park your ship somewhere where you're not in reach of any of the island cannons. So you see this cannon cannot reach me. None of these cannons are facing towards me. Now you think you're in the clear. First one, do not leave your anchor down, because there are kegs in these towers that we want to get rid of. People can just jump to these towers and grab the kegs and sink you. But the lesson ended up being interrupted because there was in fact a Reaper emissary coming my way. Reapers have good reason to attack other emissaries because a conquered flag can sell for a lot of gold, which allows me to transition into another important lesson. The only good place for a gunpowder keg is on an enemy ship. Instead of getting rid of the keg, I decided to swim it over to their ship for a sneaky little surprise attack. They were far away enough as to where I could indulge this play without putting my ship at risk would I fail, though that also meant that I'd have to contend with a few sharks in the water. Unfortunately, that fella was very aware and heard me coming a mile away, which is exactly why I decided to light the keg before getting on his ladder so that even after I was taken out, the barrel would still explode. Now here's the thing, our friend over there decided to not turn back around to fight me and instead headed for Daggertooth. I could just take this as a win and begin clearing the fort, however, this would put me at a risk of him going for a sneaky play of his own. So I decided that my best course of action was to take the fight now whilst he was potentially distracted and while I had nothing of value on my ship to lose, which he did not appreciate because I immediately took a cannonball to the face. We had a real fight on our hands, meaning it was time to lock it in. Oh. Now he's doing to me what I meant to do to him. There we go. As long as we stay cool. There goes his mast again. He's still spinning. That is unfathomably bad for him. We want to make sure he has as much or more pressure than we do right now. And right now we have a lot of damage. If we can one-ball him one more time, then this is pretty much GG. There we go, there he goes. And we obviously cannot go over right now with all the damage that we have. But we can continue the pressure. The pressure is really important right now. Now, I'm going to be the first to admit that a new player likely would not be able to replicate this scenario. Finding the right balance of bucketing water and taking shots takes a bit of experience, but as long as you listen for the sounds your ship makes as it fills with water, you'll be able to learn how much you can get away with before another bucket is required. And we definitely did not do this for nothing. Our prizes included not only a harpoon rowboat, but also their rank 3 emissary flag, which ended up fetching a very respectable 6,000 gold with the Reaper's bones. And since that potential threat was taken care of, I could finally return to my fort and actually begin clearing it. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that this content is particularly difficult to complete. Really, all you have to do is take out the waves of skeletons until the boss arrives. Occasionally, they will spawn different types of skeletons. The best way with which to deal with them will always be fire. Just be reminded that the same thing applies to you. Some of the mini-bosses drop gold pouches, skulls, and skeleton orders, which you can dig up once you are done with the encounter. A common way to deal with a boss is to simply blast some cannons into his face, just that this one ended up not liking the sound of that. Bruh, come on! He's not letting me do the cheese! Stop hiding! Stop running up there! Oh my god. I know he's running the opposite direction. Don't make this more painful than it needs to be. Yeah, if you think running this guy down with a blunderbuss would have been faster at this point, you might actually be right. Either way, the boss fell eventually, albeit with a little bit more effort than was comfortable, and I was free to collect my treasure. The only problem? I've taken a little too long to complete this fort, allowing a brigantine to catch my scent. Now, I hate to say this, gamers, but if you're a solo slooper, fighting brigantines is very much an uphill battle. All else being equal, bigger ships simply equals more better. And even if individually I was better than these guys, the fact that there's 3 of them meant that I could hold them off only for so long. Day 2 was off to a rocky start, and unfortunately, it was not gonna get much easier. Alright, new server, new ship, new me. We actually had some gold to get supplies this time, and lo and behold, another Skull of Siren Song voyage. After all the setbacks we've experienced, nothing was gonna stop me from cashing this one in. Which of course meant that there was yet another brigantine on the same quest. A smart player would probably cut their losses and do something a little more safe, but the lack of cosmetics on the ship made me feel like maybe I'd be able to win as long as I can catch them off guard. And catch them I did. My assumption was definitely right. These fellas had about as much experience in Sea of Thieves as I have talking to women, with the exception of Twitch chat's mom, of course. Finally, the game stopped giving me its hardest battles and bestowed upon me a free win. It's gonna go for me, isn't it? Of course it is! Okay, maybe not as free of a win as I was hoping. The Megalodon kept knocking me out of my spiral, meaning I could never consistently one-ball these guys to stop them from repairing. But once the Meg gave me a couple of minutes without inviting itself to the party, I could finally deliver the fishing blow. Aha, but of course it was not that simple, because they were also on the quest for the Skull of Siren Song. Their ship spawned very close to mine. The skull was now in my possession, and its turn and location was revealed. If I could sink them one more time, victory would certainly be mine. It was obvious that these guys could not quite control the speed of their vessel, leading to them ramming the island, and that gave me a prime opportunity to spawn camp so that the damage they took from the ram would sink them. Whilst my almost deck shot could have been impressive, it wasn't necessary because I found out that these guys had anchored themselves. Certainly an interesting decision, but hey, I did the same thing in the spur of the moment, so who am I to judge? Sinking them now would be a lot more difficult because a stationary ship in calm waves takes on less water than out on the open sea. And since the other guys were coming back from what was obviously an attempt to set up an ambush, my time was limited. Well, not because of them specifically. I could meet grinder them all day long since they didn't seem to be very experienced at PvP, but the stationary island cannons were currently taking shots at my boat, which will sink me faster than I could sink them via spawn camp. I arrived just in the nick of time to save my vessel, which unfortunately was not in range to take shots at the brigantine. Naturally, any time I spent repairing my ship meant that I was giving these guys the time to do the same, just that there was one thing only I had to handle. Whoa! No, not again! I hated you. Holy. How am I still alive? If that stationary island cannon had sunk me, I swear I would have rage quit then and there. At that point, I decided that securing the cell was more important than keeping my ship afloat. If they were waiting to ambush me, then my ship would be safe anyway, but if they didn't, that meant there were fewer pirates for me to go through in order to secure the skull. And I mean, bless their hearts, they were whispering in open mics in a language I could not understand, which absolutely gave away their intention. It was a valiant attempt, but don't forget that the Skull of Siren Song is a weapon in itself, and in this case, one that sealed their fate. The 50,000 gold were mine, and both of us decided to go our separate ways. I edged out a victory this time, but just a reminder, we've been several hours into our session and only just made 100,000 gold. For some reason, people just kept coming after me time and time again. Give me a damn break, man! I have 2 items on my ship! I mean, I know that an emissary flag puts a target on your back, but this was unprecedented. And when I managed to win, they never had any treasure on board themselves, meaning I was fighting over nothing. I felt like I spent more time dodging Reaper 5s coming my direction than actually collecting loot. And tell you what, completing sea forts just to immediately sell the handful of skulls you get from them is not exactly an efficient way to make money. Oh yeah, and by the way, do you remember when I told you not to anchor with your sails down, because not only does that make you a sitting duck in case of an attack, but it also shows other players that you are inexperienced? Are you joking? Cut me some damn slack! But the only thing that was cut was me. That's what I get for not following my own advice. At that point, I realized that something was off. Something that, honestly, I hadn't really ever thought about. None of the pirates I fought that day were particularly sweaty or experienced. They merely outnumbered me. But why were they so keen on fighting me? And that's when it dawned on me. My ship. To me, as an experienced player, I don't usually attack ships that don't have cosmetics, because I'm expecting them to be new to the game and not have any significant amount of loot anyway. But for an inexperienced player, seeing somebody honestly, even newer than them is one of the few times they might actually edge out a victory in PvP. I mean, we all gotta start somewhere. So in a perhaps counterintuitive twist, I decided to spend some of my gold on a handful of cosmetics just in hopes of getting caught up in fewer battles, so that I can actually earn some money. Minus 60,000 gold later and the Silver Sunset was ready to embark. But you can definitely tell that 6 hours of almost non-stop PvP and resupplying it left its mark. Not a single ship that I sank had any treasure on board, and because of my limited budget, I could not afford to buy new supplies every time I sank. So when I finally got stocked up on the back of a sea fort once again, I decided to take some extreme measures. I'm running on chances. I don't care about the loot I have on board. I'm going when no player ever wants to PvP. You can have this loot, Davy Jones. I will leave this behind, and I will go where no player will ever find me. I was going to the Devil's Roar. Now, the Devil's Roar is such an incredibly obnoxious area of the game that players who like to PvP usually stay away from it. Environmental hazards such as volcanoes would be the biggest problem I'd have to deal with moving forward. But if that was the price I had to pay to make any progress on my challenge at all, then so be it. And boy, was that ever beneficial to my mental well-being. I could finally get my flag to rank 5 without getting sunk. And I even managed to collect a whole bunch of treasure ready for Gold Rush Hour. Whoa, what did I just sell for that much money? Holy, what am I selling that's worth that much money? As you can tell, Gold Rush was not something I actively paid attention to, so the bonus money definitely caught me off guard. That's a pro tip, by the way. I know I said I'd get to 1 million without multipliers like Community Weekend or Golden Glory events, but Gold Rush happens twice every single day, increasing the value of everything you sell by 50%. And the best part for me, Gold Rush had just begun. I now had a little over 50 minutes to gather as much loot as possible to make use of this opportunity. Also, I know I said you are less likely to be attacked in the Roar, but the chance is never zero, and some random dude decided to pick a fight with me, but scuttled his boat before I could sink it after I sent him to the ferry just once. But with that guy out of the way, I set sail to speedrun my way into a skull collection worthy of 1 million gold. And tell you what, it most assuredly was an effort worth a fortune. If my ship gets hit now, I'm actually screwed. Oh, I had to say it. I had to deal with constant earthquakes and eruptions on top of boiling hot water that tried to turn me into instant ramen. Just like GamerSupps instant ramen at gamersupps.gg/cliff. Few things match the stress levels of you trying to catch up to your boat that is being pushed away from the island following the impact of a volcanic rock. This was the one situation in which I was okay leaving my ship anchored, because having to play catch up with a drifting boat in the Devil's Roar is a massive headache. But that did mean that I had to keep my head on a swivel even more than usual. Either way, if I couldn't finish a voyage due to natural disasters, instead of waiting for them to be over, I just plopped on a new one to go to an island that was currently inhabitable. And it was good to know that small islands without volcanoes could not erupt, which does mean that the neighboring volcanoes were not within striking distance of my boat. Oh, I heard that behind me. Oh boy, it's on my ship again. Why am I doing this for one freaking skull? Because that skull, dear past me, was worth a lot of money. Also, let me assure you that there was definitely a method to the madness. I was trying to maximize the gold I could make by creating a route of voyages that would circle me back to the outpost before the hour was over. That included me driving by previous destinations I had to leave early due to natural disasters to pick my skulls back up, but the schedule was rather tight. 7 minutes. God, we have a ways to go. It's north by northwest. We have wind? Of course we don't. Of course we don't have wind. Why would we have wind? The deck was certainly stacked against me, but that did not stop me from trying. I unloaded my treasure at yet unprecedented speeds, and at last I had successfully sold every single piece of loot with a whopping 90 seconds left to spare. In the 3 hours I spent in the Roar, thanks to the help of Gold Rush Hour, I managed to make a staggering 400,000 gold, just because the Ashen variety of treasure you can find here is usually more valuable than regular loot. But there are even faster ways to make money. Now that we are rank 30 in the Order of Souls, we can really kick this challenge into high gear, because what we're gonna focus doing on day 3 are raids. Now, raids are definitely the new hotness in Sea of Thieves. Introduced in 2024, raids are basically on-demand PvE events that you can dive into. The way they differ from regular world events is that they will award company-specific loot for the faction of your choice, including extremely valuable hero items. And at level 30, you gain access to the Ashen Winds raid. You know what you always get on top of your hero item anyway? The Ashen Winds skull. On a rank 5 Emissary, that skull is going to sell for 25,000 gold all on its own. For a world event that you can do on demand and complete in as little as 5 minutes. Though it is worth mentioning that in order to complete the raid, you will have to use the diving mechanic, which will put you on a different server every time, meaning you cannot stack that treasure under normal circumstances. And as fate would have it, I just so happened to be on a very quiet server with a couple reapers duking it out at the center of the map. When the fog decided to roll up to give me additional cover, I realized that this should be the server on which I level up my emissary flag. Another thing I now had access to was skeleton boss hunting missions. You know, like the one that we found on day 1 from a message in a bottle? These would help me to get my flag to rank 5 to get the most out of my Ashen Winds raids. Except, where is that guy? I genuinely cannot find him. Oh god. And the reason I couldn't find them was because the voyage was bugged. The skeletons were stuck inside a wall and I now had to find a way to get them out. Listen here, I'm showing you this because in a game as massive as Sea of Thieves, it is impossible to avoid bugs altogether. One possible solution is to force the island to reset its spawn by, unaliving yourself in the video game. In my case, that unfortunately did not work, so I had to resort to investing a bunch of cannonballs to take them out via splash damage. After which, we could commence skeleton slaughtering business as per usual. Once I hit rank 5 on my emissary flag, I was ready to sell my treasure so I could begin the actual brunt of my mission, which was diving for Ashen Winds raids. 100,000 gold just during the setup phase? Surely I was in for a hugely profitable day on the seas with nothing that could possibly go wrong. You see what I did there? That's called foreshadowing. Now finally to the Ashen Winds encounter itself. All you need to complete this raid is a sword and a blunderbuss. You can find food in the barrels and every single Ashen Winds location also has an ammo box nearby. So what you're gonna want to do is get up close and personal with your blundy as much as you can. When the boss begins to spawn minions, you can zip zap around to take them out with your sword. All you have to do is hold down block together with your attack button and then hit jump as soon as you hear the swoosh noise to get a massive dash. Once the minions are taken care of, continue blasting your blunderbuss into the boss's big dumb face, and every once in a while he's going to stagger, which gives you an opportunity for more free damage. Really, the only move you gotta watch out for is when he starts summoning fiery boulders from the sky, in which case taking cover is definitely preferable, but thankfully these don't one-shot anymore, so just keep your food close by. Though this ability is why I don't usually use my ship's cannons to defeat him, because I'd rather just worry about how much damage I have taken rather than also worrying about my ship. The reason Ashen Winds is my favorite world event is not only because it is very solo friendly, but also because you can practice it fairly reliably. There is very little on the side of random BS like a skelly ship blasting you with cursed cannonballs, and you don't need any sort of preparation to complete it quickly like a keg snack for a skeleton lord. That means how fast you can complete this is entirely up to you, and my own record at present is 3 minutes and 39 seconds as a solo without using ship cannons. Another cool side effect of raids is that, as opposed to the random world event counterpart, they spawn fewer pieces of treasure which are higher value and all belong to the faction you choose at the time of diving. So rather than a bunch of garbage that is distributed all over the place, I only have to collect a handful of items, all of which will benefit from my emissary flag. Plus, lo and behold, a tier 1 hero item. However, let's not forget that we are still playing on the high seas. Yeah, this server is getting really spicy. Thankfully, all of that is very far away from me. So we're just gonna go sell and sit down. Go to a new server. No problem. I was not gonna get caught with my pants down again. Constantly being attacked on day 2 made me a lot more perceptive, and this time I spotted the danger before it got too close. And as promised, the payoff for choosing the Order of Souls, a 25,000 gold Ashen Wind Skull plus a 12,500 tier 1 hero item. All told, we made about 50,000 gold with a single raid in basically no time flat. And because we don't have to stack a bunch of loot to get to that 50k, we also have the flexibility to dive onto a new server when things get dangerous. Though it is worth mentioning that sometimes the new server is even more dangerous. What? Excuse me? There is literally a Reaper 5 right— It's a brigantine! Are you serious? Yeah, okay, so that is not actually supposed to happen. Raids are not meant to be contested, but somehow the game has dropped me right on top of another ship currently completing said event. Running away was entirely out of the question. Brigantines are way faster than sloops, so I would never be able to build enough distance to be able to dive again. Combat was my only option. Like hell, I'd be handing them my emissary flag on a silver platter just to have to level up a new one. And for a while, it actually seemed like the fight was going in my favor. I had a decent spiral going on, they were immobilized, and I tried to aim for the hatch where they bucket water in hopes of making them bucket it right back into their ship by accident. Though let me make one thing very clear, dear viewer, there is more than one way to be good at Sea of Thieves. Of course, the crazy good PvPers that never miss a shot are of the flashy variety, but that crew, they really knew what they were doing. As I was spinning around, they simply kept repairing damages on the opposite side that I could not reach, meaning I could never stop them from fixing the damage. Okay, their aim might have not nothing crazy, but it was enough to put a lot of pressure on me as a solo. After a solid like 5 minutes of me dumping about 100 cannonballs into their ship, I realized that I was not winning this fight. I had to back out whilst they were immobile and hope that I dealt enough damage to build the distance necessary to dive away. But of course, it wasn't gonna be that simple. I had to get creative, anyone that could help. I found another sloop off in the distance fighting a skelly ship, and I mean, what better ally than another small boat to unite against the big boat? Just that they weren't the ones who were about to get involved. Oh, come on, man. Why me? Why are you... It's 3v1 and you're attacking me? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Hey, Sloop, don't know what you're up to, but you're about to have to deal with these guys as well. Good luck. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a win condition. Not every pirate you come across will necessarily be hostile towards you, but unfortunately for me, the Megalodon was more agreeable than that sloop. The brigantine finally caught up to me, and there was a little more I could do than hope for a miracle. Though my hopes were definitely not high when one of these dudes ended up sending me to the ferry without even looking at me. Thankfully, it was not game over yet. Because they were in full-on chase mode, them anchoring my ship actually meant that theirs just zipped right by me. I was given a chance to recover, and all I had to do was get this one guy off my vessel. But as it turned out, I was not destined to fight alone, because where the player sloop left me for dead, the skelly sloop came to the rescue. And that was all the help I needed. Yeah, come on, Skelly, go get him. One ball. I think, why did they oh, they got anchor ball, that's why. Thank you, Skelly ship. Yeah, exactly. They pick snipes. I can literally just kill them. No, I got anchor balled. Oh god, that's so bad. Oh, and I don't have angle, because of course I don't. He's on. Yeah, you sawed off. Even with the skelly ship mostly on my side, I was fighting an uphill battle. It's as I like to say, if I have time to repair, so does my enemy. And with me playing solo against a 3-man crew, I was never able to apply enough pressure to make them slip. When my wheel was busted, on top of me leaking from every possible hole in my ship, there was no way for me to keep up the spiral. The best I could do was go straight in order to reset whilst they were anchored. For an experienced player, the win condition is to win the fight. But for many others, it would simply be survival. I had dealt a lot of damage to their ship, and the skelly sloop was still around. If there was ever a chance for me to get away, it would be now. And as fate would have it, I got far away enough to dive for another raid. My ship, and by proxy my emissary flag, were saved. Or were they? At this stage, any well-written story worth a damn would demand some sort of uphill trajectory. Unfortunately, this is Sea of Thieves, and if there's one thing this game does not care about, it's well-written stories. Monkey Island. Point being, instead of allowing me to catch my breath, I had to deal with this. Oh god. But God was not there to save me now. Despite parking my ship behind the island with it facing towards the Red Sea, I was getting run up on by a duo sloop. Fighting at a disadvantage was the name of the game at this stage, so for me, it was just another day in the mines. These guys were slotting solidly into the not good enough to know what they're doing, but competent enough to be dangerous category. Not something a few one-balls couldn't fix though. They definitely imagined that drive-by to end off differently, but I sank their ship in no time flat. Though sadly, I underestimated just how annoying these dudes could be. Whilst I was demonstrating why I hate using my ship in order to defeat an Ashen Lord, these bozos decide to come back for round 2. And holy crap, if that wasn't ever the most infuriating fight I had to deal with yet. Bro, come on, man! I won't be able to steer my damn ship! You know what? Shoot at my ship, one-ball me, TDM me into oblivion, I don't care. But when you start busting my wheel, things get personal. Especially when, and I guarantee, these guys were doing that completely by accident. I love how they just keep hitting, like, vital parts of my ship entirely by accident. Bro, I'm gonna lose it. My wheel's always broken! 4 hours deep into day 3, having to constantly fight for my life in this challenge, my patience was growing thin. I could have sunk these dudes 5 times over if I could have just steered my boat. At one point, I finally got them pinned down again with their mast tumbling and one of them one-balled when suddenly... I absolutely hate it here. I slipped. My desire to finally want to be rid of these guys made me play a bit too close to the sun, leading to me letting my ship sink. Obviously, my ego was not gonna be okay with that. There really was no other option besides me going back for a 3rd round, even though I knew I was doing a challenge and that this was quite possibly the least beneficial thing I could do in order to finally get to 1,000,000 golds. But this was about more than just money. This was about morale. I needed some sort of victory to lean on just to give me the motivation to keep going. Tell you what, if I can't get my loot back from these guys, this would make flag for a very short day 3. The only problem with players like these is that if they don't know what they're doing, there's no way for me to predict it. On top of that, they were now in possession of not only my treasure, but also my supplies. And since all I had at my disposal were base subs, yeah, this was becoming more and more of an uphill battle. At the end, I simply gave up trying to predict their next move. I gave up repairing my wheel or adjusting my angle, simply letting the waves dictate the flow of battle. I had to make sure that my rage did not consume me. I couldn't allow myself to sink again, lest I'd be able to get away with my treasure. And at the end, with a mere 4 cannonballs left at my disposal, I made it. I finally sank them again. Alright, now everybody shut up! We got them, okay? All I want to see in the chat right now are PogChamps. I'm gonna be honest, I can't tell if I was talking to myself or the voices in my head. Alas, my foes were defeated, and even their puny attempt at using the Ashen Winds scroll to take me out had been thwarted. I could finally reclaim my treasure and bring it to an outpost. And I mean, sure, it wasn't a lot of loot, I didn't have an emissary flag, and those fights had literally expended all the supplies I had gathered. And because I am petty like that, I sold my own emissary flag to the Reaper's Bones for 1 gold piece just to make sure that these guys did not profit off of anything I had done. But at last, I was finally, truly victorious. So of course I scuttled my boat onto a new server to get another batch of base supplies and to make sure that they don't get a rematch. I told you I'm petty like that. Now here's the thing, I could continue spamming Ashen Winds raids until I eventually hit 1,000,000 gold, but reality is that I'm gonna have to continue fighting other ships one way or another. No matter how much I try, it would be disingenuous of me to suggest that you could always avoid enemy players. And if risk mitigation is no longer a concern, then there's one more thing I could rely on in order to make a lot of gold in a short period of time. And that is the Fort of the Damned. The FOTD is one of the best events in the game because at present it is the only one that can be activated by players. As long as you know how, you can do this as often as your heart desires. And okay, sure, under optimal circumstances other methods could be more lucrative, but I mean, optimal circumstances weren't exactly what I was dealing with, and chances are they're not what you will be dealing with either. What's a little more risk of PvP in a challenge where I was being hunted down relentlessly anyway? So let me show you how to start a Fort of the Damned. The process is honestly quite simple. Just plop down a voyage for a Skull of Destiny, dig it up, and you're off to the races. If you are a pirate legend, which we are not, meaning our only other option was getting the OG ritual skull, which you can conveniently find in a skelly fleet. Oh god, hey, what's up guys? Personal space much? Why are they despawning? What is happening? Yeah, things were definitely not going according to plan. Usually I like to put fire on the top deck to take out the cannoneers, but them diving underwater to extinguish the flames definitely was a new move. Thankfully, I was not the only person dealing with this nonsense. I found another ship in the event with a very nice fella who was willing to team up. We made a deal that I would get to keep every skull and he would have the rest of the items. I was very happy to see a friendly face for once. Up until then, every single pirate I came across wanted to hunt me down, so finding somebody who wanted to help a new player was most assuredly very welcome. Also a tip for taking on galleons, make sure you aim for the lower deck first so they begin taking on water. The skeletons cannot bucket, but they can repair damage, so any upper deck shots you land will literally be useless until the bottom deck is full. It is worth mentioning that more ships partaking in the fleet event did mean that we had to sink more skeleton ships, but that guy was actually incredibly competent, and with that assistance at my back, I decided to do something rather unorthodox. I'm about to do something really stupid. What am I doing? I don't have a sword! No! No, why did I do that? Oh, please, 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 please. Oh, map table! Yeah, I was not kidding when I said I'm about to do something really stupid, but listen! Stealing cursed cannonballs from skelly ships, especially powerful ones like peace balls, could be the difference maker between me winning or losing my FOTD treasure. Just that a sword to dash back to my ship could have been very useful. In the first place, I wasn't sure if this guy was actually gonna keep his end of the bargain, but he seemed nice enough and I didn't really have anything to lose besides my time. And my trust was certainly not misplaced. He did come around and let me have any skulls as well as mermaid gems, which was a massive boon to my emissary flag. But when we parted ways, I felt like this was cheating. I mean, listen, coming across friendly players is not as impossible of a thing as the comment section might lead you to believe. But do I really want to rely on other people's help to complete my challenge? I felt like that will make this whole thing a lot less replicable for the rest of you guys. So before my alliance could sell any of their treasure, I decided to disband it and go back to him to return the loot so that I would not benefit from his work. It was definitely a bit of a weird conversation to suddenly return the loot he just gave me, but what was even more weird was to find out that this man, he just wanted to fish. You see, in dangerous waters, such as around skelly ships, you can get a very special type of fish, the battlegill. And wouldn't you know it, those same fish can be found around an active Fort of the Damned as well. Had I not shown myself as friendly, chances are he would have just sank my ship and continued fishing. But anyway, I just wasted a bunch of time for no gold, no reputation, and unfortunately, no ritual skull. Now, there is more than one way to get your hands on one of these, even if you're not a pirate legend, but for now, I decided to knock out a few more skeleton boss quests and simply hoped I would stumble upon one such item. That was great for my emissary flag as well as my gold pouch, and after a little while, I did find an Ashen Guardian. This randomly spawning variant of the Skelly Captain family will drop a key as well as a map to their chest, and lucky me, inside that chest, I found myself a ritual skull. The party was officially on. All I needed now was to collect every single Flame of the Damned to activate the event, something that the RGB Skull of Destiny can do on its own, unlike the OG ritual skull. I now had to perish at the hands of a variety of different threats on the Sea of Thieves and collect the flames from the ferries, saving them on my ship's lanterns. The first one I wanted to collect was the pink PvP flame, and something I failed to mention until now was that the fisherman was hiding on my ship the entire time, which now ended up working in my favor because I could simply ask him to send me to the ferry and collect the first flame. Next I got the purple flame from dying to a snake, the blue flame from being eaten by a shark, the red flame from standing in fire, and the white flame from, do it, coward! Hit me if you can! That. And finally, the green flame from dying to a skeleton, which would end up being rather ironic because we're going through this whole trouble just to turn a whole army of them into bone dust. With all the flames collected and the ritual skull in my possession, I was ready to activate the Fort of the Damned. Now, this event might seem fairly daunting at first, but it's actually incredibly straightforward. Just like the fleet got more difficult because more players were participating, the FOTD gets easier if you do it all on your own. I didn't mind our fisherman making use of this to get some battle gil, but I did ask him not to set foot on the island itself to make sure the difficulty does not get scaled upwards. But once the flames were delivered and the skull was put in place, it was time to get some treasure. Basically, this whole encounter is just like any other skeleton fort, except every skeleton that spawns will always be one of the shadow variety. To make them vulnerable, you will have to pick up the flame that corresponds to their color and then take them out. The grate below the lantern will light up to show you which color you'll need for any given wave. If you want to go the extra mile, you can shoot the feetsies of the gunpowder skeletons to claim their kegs for a stack to use at the end. The wave of stronghold gunpowder kegs should be enough to take him out in one fell swoop, even if it means you're biting the big one in the process. It is going to save a lot of time. And at last, I was ready to collect my treasure. But if you think you're safe now that the skeleton cloud above the event is gone, you'd be mistaken. The items inside the vault include Reaper chests, which will give away the fact that the fort has been cleared. There are also a bunch of kegs, which you could use for another round if you want to stack, but that would require more prep, which we're not gonna do. So the Reaper chests get buried to get rid of the marker, and the kegs get blown up so nobody could use them against me. Also, our fisherman got stuck inside a rock and requested saving, and since I would have had to find somebody else to give me the pink flame, and because he was just an all-around nice guy, I obviously got him out. I tossed all the loot down on a rock where I could easily harpoon it onto my ship, and now you might assume I was ready to sell my treasure, but you might have noticed that the loot inside the FOTD is a wild mix of stuff belonging to a variety of companies. And since only Order of Souls loot will get boosted by my emissary flag, I decided to hold onto my stack until Gold Rush Hour, which in hindsight I really wish I didn't do. Trust me when I say this, just go sell your loot. Don't get greedy like I do. Do not make the mistakes I made. I'm so undeserving of what is about to happen. Because I had another hour to kill until Gold Rush, I decided to take on another skelly fleet. The fisherman also decided to take his leave when his friend logged in and picked him up on his original vessel. I was now completely on my own, taking on the fleet when this happened. The game crashed. Close the damn game so I can restart it! You can tell that I was not a happy camper. Now, the game does offer you to reconnect to the server for what I believe to be about 5 minutes after you disconnect, but I had a bunch of holes in my ship at the time I crashed. Seconds felt like an eternity, and by the time I got back, my fate was sealed. The ship was sunk, the treasure was lost, and with it, my hopes of completing this challenge. Wasn't it for the fisherman and his friend? Now get this, when my ship sank, they swooped in and completed the skelly fleet in my stead. My own treasure had already sunk to the bottom of the ocean by the time they rolled up, but these kind-hearted individuals offered me to keep the loot. And I mean, yeah, I didn't want to take assistance from anybody else, but losing everything I worked towards because of a dumb crash? I was gonna accept a helping hand when it was was offered to me. And honestly, I kind of like this as a message. I mean, yes, we are pirates. We're gonna be fighting each other, stealing from each other, and engaging in all sorts of tomfoolery. But sometimes we also cooperate. We help each other. We see a new player and decide, you know what, I had it rough when I tried to learn how to play, and I want to make sure that you have it easier, because I want you to love this game as much as I do, flaws and all. And that's why I decided to make this video in the first place. Make sure that you guys have it easier than I did when I first began playing. Arm you with all the knowledge you need to conquer this wondrous world and plunder its riches. And after 3 days of playing, 24 actual hours spent in the game, and a lot of help on the final stretch, we had done it. We finally reached 1 million gold on a brand new account. But hey, making gold is not the only thing you can do in this game. Among many other things are also story missions called Tall Tales, the best one of which, in my opinion, is the Shores of Gold series. If you want to watch me and my friends play through that entire thing, make sure to check out the card on screen right now. But until then, thank you everybody so much for watching. Make sure to check out gamersubs.gg/Cliff if you want to support my channel, and don't forget, I hope you guys have a day filled with riches on the sea, and until next time, peace.